Well, spring is here, and you might find yourself engaging a lot more activity than you have in the winter months, right? So Dr. Stacy Chronister is here. She's an internal medicine specialist with OSU Medicine, and I invited her today to help us with springtime injuries and ailments. Good morning.
Good morning.
You know, if you've been sedentary all winter and all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to get up and go.
Oh, yeah, it's that weekend warrior that you think about. That's the person who, you know, we haven't been doing a lot of activity, and it seems like normal things to do, but we go full out when it happens. Let's go spring cleaning, let's clean up the yard, happens all at once.
Well, and it is also the time that we have to start thinking of mowing the yard, working in the garden, doing those things. So let's talk a little bit about, I know allergies, we've had this conversation multiple times before, but they're awful in Oklahoma.
They're awful. You know, that time when your car just gets covered in the pollen right now. So yes, we want to make sure that we are protecting ourselves as much as we can. So the masks really help. Outdoor mask, any mask that you maybe even had stashed around from COVID times are going to be helpful here to keep as much of the allergens out of your nose and mouth as possible. Sunglasses are a really great option to wear outside to keep the allergens out of the eyes.
Good idea. Or if I was also thinking of just wearing glasses, protective goggles.
Regular glasses,
if you're working on stuff, it's just smart to protect our eyes.
Absolutely. And then afterwards, you want to make sure you get as much of that pollen and dust off of you as possible. So you want to take a shower, make sure you're not laying down in your bed or anything afterwards. And nasal rinses are a really great option to get the pollen out of your nasal passages and even out of your eyes a little bit to get that removed and not have an allergy attack.
Because otherwise it just kind of lingers and
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about maybe getting outdoors and maybe playing basketball, going running, going bicycling. All of a sudden you're full tilt, and as you mentioned, the weekend warrior syndrome kicks in where maybe you haven't done this in a long time, and in a weekend you find yourself...
You're just so excited. The great warm weather we have coming, the sunshine, and you just can't wait to be outside. And unfortunately, a lot of people come in with a lot of injuries, and it's not necessarily injuries that you think of, you know, oh, this knee, or oh, I strained my back. It's more subtle than that a lot of the times. It's this soreness where you think, I don't know what happened, but suddenly I'm really inflamed. And you kind of start asking the patient, well, did you go out and do something? Did you go and rake your yard? And it turns out some of those really easy kind of things end up causing a lot of inflammation in our bodies.
So let's talk about kind of ways to prevent that, because I know that, especially if you're gonna, you know, if you're gonna like, I'm gonna go bicycling, or I'm gonna go jogging, or I'm gonna go do a pickup basketball game with the guys. You really need to kind of plan in advance, because dehydration can quickly catch up with you.
Biggest thing, and especially for your joints are going to be using a lot more fluids than you typically would have, so definitely pre-hydrate. And you know, if you can tolerate taking an anti-inflammatory like an ibuprofen in advance, I highly recommend that. Definitely take a break about every hour. It doesn't have to be a 15-minute break, but enough of a break that you can stop, rehydrate, and reassess your body and really see how you're feeling.
Can you talk a little bit about, like, because I've been playing pickleball, you know, and I always have an injury, but I mean, I notice like my face is super hot, or I'm kind of, my heart rate has gotten, I think, and I'm thinking, this is great, this is good. Can you tell when you're kind of overdoing it?
Actually, at the point that you stop sweating is probably the point that you have absolutely gone too far. So if you're still sweating, you're still wiping that off, then you're still good, and you definitely need to be hydrating. It's the point that you've stopped sweating that you might not realize that I've become dehydrated at this point, and you're not thinking to drink at that point, and that's where we really start to worry.
You mentioned on the prevention stuff, ice baths, and I see that with athletes, like serious athletes, but I'm like, why would I ever do that?
I know, we all think of that pro athlete that's getting into the ice bath afterwards, but really that is going to decrease the inflammation as fast as possible. So oftentimes when we have an acute injury, we think, oh, back pain or something. You want to lay on a heating pad because that feels so good.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, that doesn't really help bring down the inflammation, and it might increase it in that acute time span. So ice is your friend in the time of acute injury. So even hands, your hands get so stiff. I say, you've been out there raking or something, put your hands in a cool ice bath as long as you can tolerate it. Probably about 10 minutes would be good, and that will really decrease that inflammation. Or even just getting yourself a good bag of ice and putting in the areas that hurt and move it around for a while.
And we talk about RICE being that acronym. So rest,
ice, compression, and elevation.
Okay, very good. So just be smart. Use your head, Leanne. I'm just talking to myself.
Drink water, take a break, reassess.
Very good. Thanks for being here. We'll see you again next month. Appreciate it. 9:19, elementary students in Broken Arrow have a new way to find something to read. How the district hopes the new book vending machine will encourage kids to pick up a new book. And finally, a movie filmed here in Green Country set to hit theaters later this year. We have the opening date for when you can see Killers of the Flower Moon.